Hey there, my name is Rachael Kalaki.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Shelby. And welcome to the Magdala Podcast.
We know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem.
The need for women to be accompanied in their journey toward healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here.
Magdala is a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom from sexual addiction through support, community, and accountability.
Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to discussions on how to live fully as a Catholic woman.
You are not alone, and wherever you are on your journey, we welcome you to this table. Oh, that's lovely. Well, Rachael, here we are. We are back, and this is not the first time we're talking today, but both times we have communicated today has had to do with technical difficulties. So how are you feeling after all of those experiences? Yeah.
I mean, you sound great, but this microphone's a lie. Like, I'm just scooching it out because
You're fasting from microphones. Hear this,
Yeah.
ladies and gentlemen. She is so holy. She's fasting from microphones now, too.
microphones and tech that works, apparently, today. We're here. It's all good.
I wonder what the next phone is, because I know you don't have a smartphone. Now you don't have a microphone. What's the next phone?
Gramophone. This Who's got a gramophone anymore? I don't know. All I know is I'm on my second latte of the day.
Sheesh. New flavor?
No, well, the first one today was honey and cinnamon. This one is honey and the cacao powder, the chocolatey powder.
Oh.
That's not cocoa powder. It's not synthetic. It's the real one. That one.
I thought you were about to say your first was honey and cinnamon and your second was cinnamon and honey. I'd be like, yeah, that's for sure different. But it's honey and cacao. How do you say that? Cacao?
I don't know. I've heard it a couple different ways, and it's one of those where it's like if you say it in the wrong setting, you're gonna feel really stupid, you know. But yeah, I'm saying it. Cacao, whatever the natural chocolate source is, that is in my coffee right now.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Yeah. Well, you are drinking some sweet things, and Rachael, today we're going to talk about some sweet things as we enter into part 2 of our restoration series. If you tuned in last time, we were talking about restoring our relationship with God, and today we're talking about restoring our relationship with others. The fun part about all these episodes is they just sort of overlap with each other. So even as we were talking about our relationship with God last episode, that had so much to do with our relationship with others. And guess what? We'll probably talk about God and ourselves, even though we're talking about others in this episode. But really just wanted to take some time to process some of the ways that sexual sin can disrupt our relationship with others and how we interact with them, both romantic relationships and friendship relationships, and then talking about like what restoration in this looks like. How can we work towards healing in our relationships with others, even with a history or a current experience of sexual sin, sexual addiction, and then sort of looking at like what really does restoration look like if we don't experience full restoration until the other side of the kingdom. Like, what do we experience now? So that is what we are getting into today, talking about restoring a relationship with others. And so I know this is a broad question, so there's a lot of ways we could go to start, but would love to hear what you think about different ways that sexual sin disrupts our relationships with others. In what ways have you seen that in your own life or in the women that we serve?
I think, yeah, the number one effect that we see, the disruption that we see in relationship with others when we're consuming pornography specifically or engaging in plenty of other types of sexual behaviors, but I'd say pornography being the main one, is we see just objectification as a result. Super disruptive to your sense of self and to your perception of other people and what they're for. You know, if we go with John Paul II's like personalistic norm, people are for love, not for use, right? That's a very simple way to put it, but sexual sin and pornography often teaches us the opposite, that people are for use and not for love. So
yes,
that's the number one effect. And I think we do talk about that a lot in the church. I think we don't necessarily, you listed some good ones that we're reflecting on here, but we don't necessarily talk about the other effects as much, but I feel like I might even see them more. Just the distrust of romance, the distrust of relationship, the distrust of sexuality in its proper context, or sexual pleasure in its proper context. Um, and then addictive behaviors of any kind isolate us from the people around us. They sever relationships because eventually we start choosing the addiction more than we choose the people around us. It takes time, it takes attention, it takes vulnerability away from us because we feel there's this huge part of our life that we can't disclose to other people. So it's detrimental in that way. It just slowly separates us from the people around us who love us. Yeah, there's plenty more, but I think those three are the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like a theme of all of those things that you named is sexual sin in, I mean, a variety of forms, but all of its forms is inherently selfish, right? Because
Yeah.
it's for use, it's for my own consumerism. Specifically, if you're looking at pornography and masturbation, it's very easy to see how that is selfish for my own use. And the more we turn to selfish things in general, the more that I am self-consumed, the less that I'm consumed with other people, the more that I'm going to isolate myself from other people. I remember even in a time in my life where I was just heavily addicted to pornography specifically. I remember just how much like my own planning of my day would one sort of revolve around that when I could sneak that in. So there was always this sense of like when could I take me time? The way that I would almost like rationalize it to myself was my own escape. But it really focused on me. And so I really feel like one of the biggest ways that sexual sin disrupts our relationships with others is it tells us that we don't need others. I can do it all on my own. I've shared I've shared the song "Love Myself" by Haley Steinfeld on this podcast before. But the phrasing of her song of like I can do this on my own. I can feel it without you. I can do all this work on my own. And so I feel like just sexual sin in its nature does exactly that. It focuses back on ourselves. And the more that we focus on ourselves, then we can't see the world and other people in their proper context. Just as you're saying, we're starting to view people in terms of use. We're distrusting what we see. The story of so many Magdala women is finally when a good guy comes around and begins pursuing in the correct context. There's immediate distrust. It can't be like that. If you're referring to content that you've consumed about how men are supposed to act around you, and the potential boyfriend, like, isn't behaving in that way, there can be all sorts of spirals of like, wow, does he even like me if he's not pursuing me for my sexual value? Because of this idolization of sexuality as a whole. So I think you had a key point there, both that selfishness and just this disruption of what sexuality is at all. And so then that disrupts so much of our relationship with others.
Yeah, you said so many good things, but you used the word inherently selfish at the beginning, and I think that's important. It's important to clarify, like inherently being a moral term, because a lot of excuses surrounding sexual sin is, especially I'd say interpersonally, is that like, but I love this person, or I did it out of love. I did, and
Yeah.
that can absolutely be mixed in. But our intention doesn't change the object of what an act is. That's a moral premise in the Catholic Church, is that our intention can be good and the object of the act, if it's evil, then the act is still evil, even with a good intention or an understandable circumstance. And that's one of the heartbreaking things about a lot of sexual sins or unwanted sexual behaviors, is they occur in contexts or in circumstances that are very understandable. Like if you're consuming pornography because you have a history of sexual trauma, that's an understandable circumstance. Still an objectively evil or objectively selfish act. Or if you're sleeping with your boyfriend who you do love and who you do care for and want to spend your life with, still an objectively selfish and evil act, because fornication is itself wrong. So I think that word inherently is just really important, of no matter what way we're trying to use these things, no matter what our intention is, they are inherently disruptive to us. They're going to be disruptive to our relationships with other people, no matter how frequently, no matter how um, how well intended we are. And I feel like you and I hear a lot of intentions or a lot of reasons behind use, right? Like we've heard
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of things at this point. But it doesn't change what the thing is, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I thank you for voicing that. The memory that comes to mind is in college, a long-term relationship I was in
Mm.
where we were really trying to live chastely. This was probably the first relationship where I was like, oh, okay, we got to set appropriate boundaries and we can't, and in this relationship, we were also long distance at the time. And so I remember we would come together. And it's, of course, this is the experience of so many women, men who have been in long distance relationships. So I know I'm speaking to an experience of many, but when we finally see each other again, there feels even this greater need, or
Mm.
like language I would use to almost justify the action was this like, oh, well, I'm not going to see him for a month. So I want to give more of myself to him, like give an experience he can remember, and we would cross physical boundaries. And I remember in the moment, like, of course, feeling a little like, oh, we shouldn't have done that, but I was also like, no, like, but I would justify it on the grounds of
Mhm.
like we didn't have this time together. But I do remember like when he would leave, like immediately I was like, oh, like I wasn't doing that for him. Like I was doing that for me. Like there was
Mhm.
something that I wanted out of it. And again, like to share some of the good desires, it was the fact that I loved this man and I hated that he had to leave and I wanted him as close to me as long as he could be, So but again, selfishly, that's what I wanted. I was grasping. I really, really wanted that for me. So yeah, thank you for voicing that. Because even as we speak about this being selfish, like also with such a understanding and merciful heart, like we do so many things with
Mhm.
lovely intentions that also still have objective poor reasoning, and so it's the beautiful uh, a reality that the Lord sees us in our mess and in the just spiral of all sorts of desires, both good and bad, and is able to pull out the good and name the
Yeah.
good in them, while still being like very firm. Think of like the woman in adultery, okay, and go and sin no more. He doesn't say go off and keep hooking up with random people. He says no, 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 like go and sin no more. He cares about the heart, and he goes after mercy. But then if we don't also like is set a boundary, draw a line in the sand, if you will, of like what is what is that. So yeah, that was just a
Mhm.
memory that came to mind when you shared that.
Mm, yeah. And I think the distrust piece that you spoke about too, or that we wanted to touch on is key here. I'm thinking of, yeah, just my own story and how my heart received pursuit or romance. Um,
Yeah.
it's so deeply tied to that inherent selfishness because then, like, from years of behaving a certain way in isolation and in secret, um, not only did I set a negative pattern for myself, but even when I was sober and healing, I set a negative pattern of thought. So when I'm being authentically pursued, and this is in college relationships or with my husband, it's like I had a very hard time shifting out of the thought that I was inherently selfish. Like I had a very hard time
Yeah.
trusting that he wasn't, right? Or whoever was pursuing me wasn't,
Right.
but also that I wasn't. And I think that's one of the tragic effects too. But also I do think one of the best parts of healing is when you get down, yeah, you like it's not just about stopping behavior. It's like what are the mindsets and the vows and the beliefs like created by my behavior? And I think that's one of the most disruptive ones is I had been doing inherently selfish things for so long that even when I wasn't doing them anymore, I still believed I was inherently selfish, you know? So I
Mm,
think
mm.
I think it's interesting to think about that of like not just the behaviors create these attitudes. It's like you're holding on to that attitude. If that makes sense. I feel like I'm not like clicking into that thought right now, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yes, no, Rachel, you make sense, and it reminds me in a similar way of just yeah, because of the content we consume, because of sexual sin, again, that this way that we view others is similar to the way we view ourselves and vice versa. And they get
Yeah.
intermingled. I think of that in the same language of, one of the ways that sexual sin disrupts our relationships with others is simply viewing other people's as objects, as their use comes from their sexuality. And then vice versa, that my use, the way I view myself, is that my value comes from my sexuality. Like objectifying myself is a huge piece. And I know that I've had to go through a lot of healing in the way that my relationships, even with friendships, have changed and shifted because of how much I would, even just in my thoughts, like fixate on the bodies of other people. I think this is a common experience for women, of course, from like a lens of comparison, like wanting to look different, all of those things. But especially when it comes to, I'll say, sexual value, when I was very much engaging in tons of sexual sin, I do remember that like I would almost rank the women around me based on their sexual appeal. That I would feel, this sounds like a little bleh to say, but I know this is a semi-common experience. Like I would feel more
absolutely.
secure around women that I somehow attributed them to having less sexual value or appeal, and I would feel more insecure around women who I attribute to have more sexual appeal. I would feel more insecure around women who were revealing more parts of their body because somehow that meant that I wasn't able to be more objectified, which is where I found my value. And these women were able to show more of themselves, thus making them more attractive, desirable. That was the thing I wanted. But I definitely remember experiencing this disconnect, even in friendships. Of I didn't feel like I could function the same way because so much of my mind was focused on my own sexual appeal, walking by people. Are they viewing my body in a certain way when I'm having these conversations? Are people finding me desirable? That's a huge desire of the human heart, and that was the biggest aches of those seasons of my life when I was trying to be pursued by a lot of different people. And one of my biggest roadblocks to that is when other people were found more desirable than me. And I would have sort of these conflicts in friendship if I found, you know, the person that I was interested in pursuing was interested in another girl, again, usually because of something having to do with objectification. Obviously, this is a common experience outside of the sexual lens, but then you add the layer of like when you have been so when you have been so accustomed to looking through the world in a pornographic lens, then that is the same way that I'm then viewing relationships, that the pursuit has to come from this pornographic lens. And so even my friendships and their values have to do with a pornographic lens.
Yeah. Thank you for just sharing that too, because I do think this is a relatively common experience. And even hearing you talk about it, it's like, gosh, it's just about control. Like, it's so about like objectification is rooted in control of like, I can control what other people do. I can control how other people see me. Like, it's just control because we're so afraid. And again, the tragedy of like the later distrust in authentic romance, authentic pursuit coming from a genuinely virtuous and loving place, is when we've demanded desire, like when we have tried to control it, when we've demanded or tried to demand that people see us as desirable, which I would say is definitely more of a temptation for women than men. But again, that to be desired is just like you pointed out, a desire, but it's in the human heart, regardless of male or female. But I'd say women perhaps seek more control of that space more regularly. When we've demanded it and we've been in a pattern of demanding it, when it actually comes down the line and it's being given, it's so hard to receive it, because that's supposed to be the posture all along, is to be receptive to desire when it comes our way in the space where God's calling us to receive it and asking us to, and it's in a genuine and ordered place. But because we've been in that pattern of controlling it for so long, it becomes really difficult.
The Magdala podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Theology Show, presented by Ave Maria University. The Catholic Theology Show covers themes such as the value of a Catholic higher education, religious liberty, how to pray, the philosophies of St. Thomas Aquinas, and more. Stream episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and learn more by visiting the link below.
I love the language of pornographic lens that you use, because I've written about this in other places, and I just think it's so interesting. Because I think objectification, I think it runs rampant in like secular LOL, secular culture.
Yeah.
But I'm also just finding so much objectifying language still in the church, like in how we talk about women, how we talk about men, how we talk about marriage, all this stuff. Like, when I hear, this is going to get, like, I guess a little bit more social, but I think the disruption of relationships with others, like, this is how it's playing out in the social sphere too.
Yeah.
I think even in like the trad wife stuff, like, women are for making babies, right? It's like, well, you're defining women by function. That's objectification.
Yes.
Like, no matter how noble and good that function is, you're defining a person, a complex, unique, unrepeatable human being by a function of, like, this is what you're for. And to me, when I hear that kind of stuff, even within like the church sphere, it reeks of pornographic language, because when you're so accustomed to thinking that way, of like, this is what I'm for, or this is what women are for, this is what sex is for. It's like, what it is for love. What we are made for is for love. Anything else is a cheap substitute. Even, again, if that function that we're defining people by is good and noble in and of itself. Because sex is good and noble in and of itself, right? It's a good thing. But if we say people are for sex, that's degrading. That's objectification. It's the same thing with other functions. But I'm finding a lot of spaces are looking through that pornographic lens. And I just think it is a disruption of a society that's been morally educated on porn, even within the church.
100%. And I think it's been interesting watching, I'll say generally, again, from a social sphere, like the church's language over the years regarding sex, and those shifts that are trying to be made in results to other things, right? So basically just in response to, again, like the trad wife, like women are for babies, like in some sense is coming from the good place of trying to fight this like extra feminism sphere that says like women don't need to be mothers, right? This anti-mother place that then again comes to a full different extreme, and yet virtue is always in the middle. And in the middle is this unity of all the things, is this unity of recognize that we are not our function, we aren't what we do. This is the consistent identity talk of all time. But again, specifically in the sexual sphere, it's just so important to talk about, like, our value does not come from our sexuality. Our value does not come from our fertility. Our value does not come from these things that we are able to do to produce our productivity on a certain day. When you have been logged out of your laptop for an hour today, like, your value today, Rachel, is not changing because you were able to get less work done. This is the common language of forever. And yet, like, we can look at how the church has sort of spoken about sex over the years, and there's always some sort of value being placed on what is done, what there is to do, instead of again, it sounds so simple, but how do we get sex back to being love, and not just love in the cultural sense, but love in the ultimate form of love that we see in Jesus on the cross? That is love, that self-sacrificial love, that laying down of everything for the other, that in the marital act, like, sex is a complete sacrifice of self with the complete focus of the other. How do we get back to living selflessly, and how do we get back to love in that space? Like, that has to be our question when we think about in our relational sphere, knowing that there is this pornographic lens, or this use space, this objectifying lens, which you so beautifully explained, that objectifying even past sexual, that we can objectify all sorts of people.
Mhm.
My last thought, I've heard Christopher West speak about objectification, even just saying like, how do we not objectify like people who come to do tasks for us that in some sense could be using them. So again, think of a plumber that comes like there is a way um like in some sense or another that you could objectify a plumber, saying
Yeah.
I have no care for his dignity or value, and he's going to come and he's going to do this job. I'm not going to acknowledge that he's here. He's essentially just an object or tool for my use. Obviously that's very extreme language. No one's going to say that I think exactly like that, but there is a huge difference between that realm or like this is a beautiful human being. When he comes in the door, I'm going to ask him his name. If he starts talking to me like he needs help with something, I'll see if I have tools for him, like being able to engage with him, even though like the relationship is utilitarian, like it is
Right.
for the sake of like there's a common function that he can do. But there is a way that even in every relationship we can objectify. So, but full circle, how do we get back to sacrificial love in all relationships? That even in that relationship, that I'm focused on the other and not just what
Mhm.
the other can do for me. That has to be part of our restoration in this.
Yeah, like the metaphor you gave, it seeing past the function. It's not saying the function shouldn't be there. Like he's still a plumber, right? But it's seeing the person behind the functions, the operations, the acts, and I think a necessary part too, like when we're talking about distrust again, a necessary part of self-sacrifice, specifically in marriage and in married sexuality, a necessary part of self-sacrifice is receiving the other person's self-sacrifice. So not only do I give myself entirely, I open myself up entirely to receive the gift of my spouse, and the entire person that he is, sexuality, emotions, like his entire embodied person. I open myself up to that. But I think oftentimes like we almost talk about it sort of as like a or not recompense. Gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, there's a different word I'm thinking of, but we'll go with compensate. So out of like a sense of compensation, when we talk about like recovering self-sacrifice, we're like, I give, I give, I give, I give, I give, and I never think of myself, and I remember, gosh, yeah, I remember a confession within the first year of my marriage. And I knew this priest. I knew this priest really well from work, but he didn't know it was me in the confessional, so that was really funny. But
Awesome.
I was like, ah. But I confessed something like I thought of my own pleasure with my spouse or something. Like I thought like I wanted pleasure in an experience with my spouse. And he was like, that's not a sin. And he just like kind of drilled into me. He's like, of course you want that. Like, and you wanted it in its proper context. The problem is when like your spouse becomes just a means to that end. But of course you wanted it. You desired it. Great. You're in the context for it. Um, and I think when we're talking about self-sacrifice, we can think like I have to shove my own desires, my own pleasure out the window and just sacrifice. But it's like, no, the goal is, and if we're talking about a marriage specifically, the goal is to bring those things into tandem of how can my desires and the other person's desires and needs and emotional state and like just again that whole embodied person, how can we prioritize one another, put the other's good before my own, and trust that my own good will also be prioritized by the other person. It's like this symbiotic thing of like if I look after him and take care of him and think of him and prioritize him, I can also rest in the trust that he will do the same for me. And
Hmm.
that's in sex, that's in conversation, that's everywhere, right? That's the goal. A very, very, lofty goal. But I think so much of it is like Christ sacrificed himself on the cross, yes, but we also have to be open to receive it.
Yes,
Otherwise,
yes,
gift is lost. Anyway,
yes.
that's a
I wish people could see as you were doing that. You continued to like interlock your fingers, and it was like all of them together. But again, this image of unity, that the whole point
Mhm.
of our sexual sphere is meant to bring us together, and in bringing two people together in the marital act, in bringing again even like chastity and friendships, like all of this is meant to unify us. And when we become
Mhm.
more one with the people around us, that is Christ Church becoming more one, which is the bride becoming more one with the bridegroom, Christ, that all of this is about unity and bringing together. And I mean, sort of full circle, one of the initial things that you said the sexual sin does is it isolates us from other people. That is a common place that the enemy always wants to attack, that you are in this alone. You should feel shame about this. You shouldn't tell anybody about this. You should, in reverse of your interlocking fingers, you should go be in a corner by yourself. Do you remember the game? Was it called Four Corners? And then like somebody would pick a corner, and if you were standing in the corner, you were out. Do you know what I'm talking about? That like elementary school game.
Yes, I
But
do.
then if you were in the corner alone, but that so you didn't want to be with too many people, but that if you were one of like the last ones standing, there was this um isolating piece. Anyway, that was the image that came to mind. But like what the enemy wants to do is to isolate you, to keep you from other people, making you think that you're the only one. He doesn't
Right.
want you to share about these experiences ever, which makes total sense in the context of what the Lord wants for you is communion with himself, communion with the church, community, like heaven is a community of saints and angels. And of course, the enemy would want to attack that and make you think that there's not other people around,
Right.
that you aren't made for unity with these other people, even in a relationship. Again, a spousal type relationship within marriage. Of course, the enemy wants to attack a marriage and doesn't want to bring the couple together, doesn't want them to engage, sure, in a sexual relationship, but also doesn't want them to feel unified as a couple, because they are one flesh, and he wants to disrupt that order. And so it makes sense that from so many experiences of sexual sin, that women experience this isolation of self, this isolation even within relationship. I've heard the stories again many times of couples who have gone too far continuously prior to marriage, and them feeling farther away from each other, yet they're spending time doing so many intimate things with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can even, share that own experience of some of my own relationships that have gone too far, that it never, in the big picture, it never had me feeling closer to the individual. But
Mhm.
honestly, feeling more disconnected, because oftentimes it would be when we needed to talk about something more serious and we both didn't want to do it. And so then we avoided it in a coping mechanism of going too far physically. And then I would come back and I'd be like, wow, I don't feel seen or heard at all because we didn't get to talk about this thing that we needed. I have one experience that comes to mind of being in college and coming back from a break, and the guy that I was talking to at the time was so excited to see him, hadn't seen him in a month, was asking him about all this stuff he was doing over the summer. He was giving me sort of short responses, and then would start making a move, and I'd be like, okay, maybe later, can I talk to you more about like some of the things that were going on? And it was this, obviously I felt his desire to use me and felt really hurt by that. But I think that's just a tangible example of like we weren't even able to unite on a heart level first, because we were trying to unite in a different way. So yeah, just sharing all that to say that like isolation is exactly what the enemy wants, and is the last thing that the Lord wants for us in our sexuality and our chastity and in our life.
Yeah, that can happen in marriage too. I think it's important to point out that like just because sex is happening or sexual things are happening within marriage doesn't make them unifying. Like if
Yeah.
you're still seeing the person as means to an end, if you're still um yeah, you can objectify within marriage essentially, and as something to be mindful of, is that you're always trying to grasp an even deeper vision of the mystery of the person in front of you that you're with. And ironically, the more you revere that mystery of the person, the more unified you actually are to them. Um, but I think, yeah, within marriage, you can pursue sexual unity with no heart and no emotional connection, no prioritization of the other person's good. And that's isolating too, deeply. So,
Okay.
and I think we hear that we hear about the isolation from so many different participants, whether
Yeah.
married, religious, single, whatever status. It's like that isolation is so key. And so I think you and I talked about like how to remedy that in part is radical honesty, as with
Yes.
as with everything else in recovery. Um, is yeah, in order to stop objectifying, you first have to like pull yourself out of the corner, so to
Yeah.
speak, and start to be honest with people, start to give more and receive more in the relationships that you have, um, in that emotional sphere. Because I think it does counteract, when the physical has been overemphasized. Is like if we truly open up our heart with all of its crap, even,
Yeah.
there's a medicine in that. And so being honest in the relationships that you have about, um, yeah, about your recovery, about what's going on, and but also just the deeper heart issues beneath it and everything it's bringing up, I think it really, one of my friends says all the time, like the best disinfectant is sunlight. And um objectifying behavior, yeah, it's only bred in isolation. So when you pull yourself out of it, it starts to remedy itself a little bit.
Yeah, 100%. I just feel like I wish there was someone to tell me. So I'm just going to say, you are not the woman. You are not the only woman who has ever objectified someone. Again,
Mhm.
in church language, specifically, that action has always, always, always been placed on the man. Modesty talks have to addressing modestly because men will objectify. Women,
Woof.
you will also objectify. Welcome to the club. That's not a celebration piece, but that is even that as we're looking to restore the ways that we view others, view ourselves,
Mm.
view God, all of those things. We have to be okay sharing those experiences. So yes, I mean we've talked in multiple occasions about like healthy disclosure, like finding safe people to talk to, again about addiction, pornography, masturbation. Just want to also share like in any ways that you could be struggling with lustful thoughts, fantasizing, like all of that. Like the Lord is after
Mhm.
your wholeness and all of that. And even when you are tempted towards that, being able to voice that to someone is so
Huge.
so healing. Being able to out loud make something tangible. I just think there's something like God comes to us in the incarnation tangibly. In the Eucharist, He comes to us again tangibly. um the word was made flesh, that there's something really powerful about you using our voice, using our words, no matter how hard it is to be able to vocalize these things, having a trusted source where we're able to enter in with vulnerability and honesty. That's friendships and definitely in romantic relationships, in within proper boundaries of where you are dating, engaged, married, but within those spaces, being able to share so transparently about these things is one of the greatest places of restoration, because within voicing it, you're able to see for yourselves in ways that you are falling short, in the ways that you are viewing others, viewing yourself. At the same time, they are able to speak life into you about the good that they see in you, so that you don't have to isolate yourself, and the good that you're able to see in others, which is what the Lord is after all along. Honesty, bro. Pass it on. You know the signs that are like honesty, pass it on. That's it.
No, that's it. That's everything. And the podcast. No, I was thinking, it's a like a key piece of Ignatian spirituality, the agere contra, sorry, to act against. Like Ignatius was really big on this of, um if you are tempted towards a particular thing or have a certain tendency or whatever, consciously acting against it, uh is part of the growth. So if you are tempted to objectify or even catch yourself objectifying someone, um act against, it don't I think especially if you've noticed like, oof, wow, yeah, I just used that person in a fantasy, or I had a comparison thought about that person. The temptation is to beat the crap out of yourself and feel ashamed, but act against. So if you're finding the temptation arise, or if you've already done it, consciously do something that's the opposite of objectification, which would be, again, revering the mystery of the person, being grateful for an aspect of them, yeah, praising God for creating them, all sorts of things. So even if it's just a quick prayer of like you compared your body to the body of a friend, like what you're talking about, Annie, of just this
Yeah.
ranking of sexual value. Pause for a moment and say like, oh, actually, God, thank you for this person's sense of humor and the way they always bring just laughter and joy to my day. What a wonderful thing you've placed in them. It can feel corny, it doesn't matter, but you've acted against
Yeah.
objectification. And
Yep.
so then
Yes.
if you're slowly creating this attitude, this posture of gratitude, of encounter, even if it just feels like small baby steps, that does build over time. And so again, we want to act positively. We want to crowd objectification out. We don't just want to like cut it out of our lives. We want to say like, okay, we're going to build up positive behavior, positive reinforcement so that there's no room for objectification anymore. You know, that's a thought.
Yes. Yes. I just wanted to keep fanning the flame as you were popping off, and just share that in talking about what real restoration looks like, it's exactly that. It's not saying that these thoughts, temptations are going to go away, but it's always that how do we respond to them? That real restoration is being able to attack that thought right away and be able to respond, thanking God for the beauty of his creation. Like real restoration looks like responding when you're at step one before you reach step seven. I use that language. Me and my fiance right now use that language of step one could be like the slightest near occasion of sin, and step two and three are deeper near occasions of sin, and then the temptation, and then the like trigger that could trigger the trigger. It's like starting at very step one. That immediately, as you recognize that, you're reaching out, you're telling somebody, you're changing environments. Like you don't let yourself get into step three where it's harder, even if it's still not quite sinful yet. Like real restoration is being able to acknowledge right away at step one, like, oh, this could go poorly. Jesus, I love you. I don't want to go down that path. So let me do this other thing. Like that is part of the real restoration, is being able to respond to these things. Real restoration is not that they won't be there. They will be there. We're living in a pornographic culture. We're all wounded in God knows how many ways. It's then how are we going to respond to that? Specifically, like again in objectification, like how are we able to choose the good of the other people, able to see them as someone with dignity? Am I able to see myself with dignity? Am I objectifying again in use and in other areas of my life? Are there friendships that I only value for their use, that that they're good at getting my homework done? I don't know. So I'm going to be in a study group with them, but I don't care about their value otherwise. Like there's many superficial ways of how we can entrust those things, but that's definitely one of the ways that yeah, just what it looks like practically is just that. It's not that it's not going to happen. It's how we respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
True. Well, any other thoughts specifically about what this looks like? I'll say in reality. Uh, like, because the other thing that comes to mind is, again, in being honest and transparent. It's being able to talk about at the right time, like if you're in a romantic relationship with a significant other, about a history of sexual sin, not trying to make it look less bad or sort of better, or sugarcoating it, or slightly saying that you might have struggled with lust on one random day in June when you were 15, but in transparency and honesty, saying this has been my experience, and sharing it as it is, that's part of the healing journey. The more we're able to dialogue about this honestly, in the right context, is how we continue to restore relationships with others who we're supposed to unify with. And so we can't do this healing journey alone. We have to share our experiences with them. And so being able to do that in transparency and honesty, not trying to sugarcoat anything, but just speaking as it is. I was curious if you had any other ideas of things that would look in reality, what this restoration could look like.
Mm. I mean, I think if you're in a committed relationship where it's safe to do so, saying sorry if you do objectify, feeling safe to say sorry, um, apologizing for use, I think is huge, and repenting, like authentically repenting to the person. Again, there's relationships where that's appropriate, and relationships where that's not.
Right.
But I think if it is appropriate, yeah, asking for forgiveness, I think that's huge, and just saying, yeah, I was not prioritizing your good. I was not revering you and who you are and who just the mystery that God has created you to be. And I'm sorry, and I'll do better. And I think it can be so simple, but just however objectifications occurred or use has occurred and that disruption, I think apologizing can be incredibly restorative.
Amen. We all need to repent more.
Repent.
I believe in the gospel.
I know. That's where my brain went too.
Okay, lovely. Well, I don't know the best way to close this episode, but real restoration is possible. Amen. And we're gonna keep working more towards it. So till next time.
Sweet.
Thanks for listening. Check out more podcast episodes, blog posts, and how to get involved with Magdala by visiting our website, magdalaministries.org. Your love is meant to change the world. We hope to see you soon.